Hello, Jesu. Time for another Fireside Chat. Good to see everybody. I'm doing something a little different today. Somebody mailed me, a parishioner, some bulldog socks for the Jesu Bulldogs. So we're in full Jesu today. So thanks for the gift. How nice was that? This is a question that's come a variety of ways from many of you. And a lot of it is about your grandchildren or your children not so big on the church anymore and wanting to know what to do. So these are my 4 reasons. There are many more, but my 4 reasons for why I'm Catholic. I think it's an important topic because there's a lot of challenging situations in the church today, and people are upset about one thing or another. And I think it's good to step back and say, well, why am I Catholic at all? And what difference does it make? Some of the issues that people have, especially younger people, but not just younger people, about various issues in the church today, first, I think can be looked at in this way. If you go back to the very beginning from St. Paul and St. Peter, they struggled how to get along. Peter didn't think that Paul was doing the right thing. Paul wanted to forego some of the Jewish dietary habits or traditions and circumcision, and Peter thought that they should continue, and they fought over this. The early church fought bitterly. All the great church councils, the great Council of Nicaea and Chalcedon, are all because there were challenges and people fought about things and they didn't agree. It's a great line, I think, from the Council of Ephesus. When one buddy makes a comment, a bishop says, you can't even go to the market without getting into a fight with someone. And that sounds familiar, doesn't it? I think fighting in the church is a good thing. It means people are passionate and they care. What if I said, you know what, I don't agree, goodbye. That must mean your faith was never really that profound. I think we should fight, and I think fighting means the church is alive. Maybe not fighting, arguing, discussing, etc. So, in the midst of all the reasons why people struggle, and there are some really good ones, just the church's handling of the sexual abuse crisis, for one. Why am I Catholic? There are 4 reasons why I'm Catholic. The first reason is, despite all of its challenges over the years, the greatness of the church, but also the greatness of the church's sinners, bad leadership, etc. The church has never wavered in its keeping alive the memory of Jesus. The whole reason why we know God and can come to God's will is because of Jesus Christ. And the church has never wavered and never faltered in helping us to keep the memory of Jesus alive. That's hugely important. The second reason, we say it every Sunday in the Nicene Creed. We say one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. This is just me talking. It's not official church theology, but the word apostolic is so important to me because what we profess as Roman Catholics is that we believe in the church that Jesus left behind, that the apostles shared. And so for us, everything we do, our interpretation of Scripture, how we celebrate the sacraments, goes back to those early years of the church, the communities of believers that the apostles left behind. Once we snip ourselves off from the apostles, we're unmoored, and we make some of it up as we go. How do we know how to interpret Scripture? Well, how did the early church interpret Scripture? Especially those 150 years maybe after Jesus, when the church was forming itself. It was the memory of the apostles that kept it anchored. And for us as Roman Catholics, this memory is of critical importance. The sacraments come from this memory. How we interpret Scripture, how did the early church believe and practice? This is critical. When we cut ourselves off from the apostles, we've cut ourselves off from Jesus himself. For me, this line in the Nicene Creed is of crucial importance for my own reason of being a Catholic. I may struggle with the church's handling, let's say, of sexual abuse, but I don't struggle with how the church interprets Scripture, the role of the saints, the sacraments, the Eucharist, because it's what the apostles left behind to these communities. Really important. The next one, and the next 2 are really related, the sacramental life of the church. The church's sacramental theology is powerful to me. Of course we have Scripture, and the church says that Scripture and tradition, the apostolic tradition, are the 2 anchors that we base our faith in. But our belief in the sacramental theology of the church, to me, is very important. We Catholics believe that God relates to us in ways that are fundamentally human. What do I mean by that? How do we relate to everything in the world? Our family, our friends, everything. We relate to them through our senses, through ways we can see, taste, touch, smell, feel. How do we remember smells and tastes? We see our parents, we remember voices, we smell anything. We smell food, we taste, we touch, we know services, how they feel, voices that are so important to us, smells that are so important to us, vision. The church believes that God truly communicates to us in ways that are fundamentally human, and that part of God's grace comes to us through our senses. That's a sacrament. That's what we mean by sacramental, a sacramental view of the world. And it makes sense. How would we know God if it's not through our senses? It's the way we learn. It's not just that we take the scriptures and we ponder them and come up with something. It's that we believe God touches us through our sacraments. And honestly, we can't just take the scriptures and ponder them. We have to go back and see how the apostles pondered them first, because they knew Jesus. But anyway, so sacramental theology is hugely important to me. And finally, the Eucharist. This is Vatican II calls it the source and summit of our faith. What we know in the early church is early on, we know this from St. Ignatius of Antioch. Well, we know this from the scriptures, from St. Paul in Corinthians, all four of the Gospels, St. Ignatius of Antioch, the Didache, early church writings. We know that the church gathered to do what? To share scripture, which meant the Old Testament, and to bless the bread and the wine and share it, to say the prayers and to remember Jesus' saving action and to know he was truly present. What strengthened the church in those early years? It wasn't the New Testament, it didn't exist. It was the Eucharist. It was gathering in a community and celebrating that Jesus said he would never abandon us, he would be with us always in a profound way. This was the most profound belief of the early church. You know, I think of those early church, the many martyrdoms that happened, and our earliest Christian brothers and sisters. What gave them courage? It was gathering together with their fellow believers, breaking the bread, sharing the cup, doing the blessing, and knowing with certainty that Jesus would accompany them in all the glorious, wonderful times, but in all their suffering. The church grew out of the Eucharist. The church, as we know it, grew out of these people coming together and celebrating the Eucharist. The scriptures grew out of this community of celebrating the Eucharist. It's the source and summit of our faith. If we cut ourselves off from the Eucharist, we've cut ourselves off from the apostles, we've cut ourselves off from how our earliest brothers and sisters encountered Jesus and passed that on to us. This is critical and crucial. So whenever there's challenges in the church, when there are many all the time, when we fight about what the church believes, I think I believe this, the church says that, why, etc., I always remember the Eucharist is which brings us together. It's the apostolic tradition that helps us understand Scripture. It's the memory of Jesus alive. And it's that sacramental view of the church that helps me to keep anchored in the church. We're still going to argue. We're human and we see things differently. But those things keep us connected with Jesus and become the most important thing of all. That's why I'm Catholic. That's why I find great life in the church. And I'm pretty sure that's true for most Catholics, but if it isn't, I hope it will be. Keep those questions coming, Jesu, and have a great day. God bless.